Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ask a Parent. My name is Luminara Serdar. I'm your host, and I'm a holistic health practitioner who helps kids with the symptoms known as autism. And that includes anything on the autism spectrum, like sensory processing disorder, ADHD, ADD. And I help them to feel better in their bodies, minds, and spirits, and so that they can express who they truly are in the world. I use neuromodulation technique, nutrition, detoxification, my background in science as a molecular biologist, and other holistic methods, whatever is needed to create lasting transformations in their bodies. I host and produce the Autism Recovery Summit, which brings possibilities of healing and hope to parents with kids on the spectrum, and I'll be having one of those later on this year, so stay tuned for that. And you can find lots of resources on my website, autismtransform.com. Today, I'm really excited for Joanie Calem to be here with us. She'll be saying a lot of things, but the title of her being here, I guess, interview is Music for Children and Families and How to Get Through Life with Autism. And it's about more than music. So I'll just give a little intro for Joanie, and then I'll let her share a little bit of her story. Joanie contacted me a couple of years ago and asked to be in a webinar, and I thought that would be really cool, and it just never happened. And then I met her in March at a retreat, and she played some music, and she was just lovely, and I said, oh my gosh, I want to bring Joanie to parents and practitioners too, because I feel like Joanie has a lot to share. So she's worked as a performer and educator since 1983, and when she began her career as a Suzuki piano music teacher, she gained a reputation for the teacher who could think outside the box, teach outside the box, and reach kids who were failing in other contexts. So she has a real way of getting kids. She has a BA in music in community building and using music in therapeutic contexts, including working with adults with disabilities, histories of addiction, mental illness, homelessness, intergenerational programming. And in the disability world, since 2013, Joanie's been leading parent and community workshops on autism, sensory processing disorder, and building inclusive classrooms and community settings. So with that, welcome, Joanie.
Thank you.
I'm so glad to have you here. I'm hoping that maybe you can start a little bit with your story with your son, whatever you want to share about that. And then what I'd love to do is then move to, you said you have an overview of sensory processing disorder in a format that parents can share with teachers and other people involved in their kids' lives. So maybe that creates a better understanding.
Yes. Well, my son is now 23. He is a very talented visual artist. And so he is currently at the Columbus College of Art and Design here in Columbus, Ohio, where we live. Academics are really hard, really, 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 really hard. Social skills are really hard. He most of the time knows what should happen, but sensory processing and sensory overload get in the way on a regular basis. He's got lots of different self-help therapies that he uses. He's a fan of EFT, emotional freedom technique. He uses tapping on a regular basis to help himself calm down. But life is moving pretty fast, as we all know, and a lot of times it's going faster than somebody can process when they have a sensory processing disorder, as the professionals call it, difference, as I like to call it. I think the term disorder is so pejorative, and the fact is that we all process our senses in different ways. I have started doing teacher workshops because, I know we've got people here from all over the states, at least. I don't know if all over the world. So I can't speak to the rest of the states, but I'm living here in Ohio. And I know that most of the educational schools that new teachers are going through in order to get their teaching degrees do not touch on sensory processing disorder. So these teachers are not, general ed teachers are not exposed to this at all. Teachers who go on to do a master's in special education, of course, they do learn about sensory processing disorder, but your general ed teacher who's going into the classroom for the first time, they've never heard of it. They don't know what it is. And so, of course, therefore, they have no tools to identify when a child who has sensory processing issues is in their class and is having behavior issues because they've got sensory processing issues. So I have started doing workshops here for teachers. I just did one for the big, I don't know if you guys can see anything, and it's probably backwards.
No, it looks great.
Okay, good. So this is a handout that I have created using a lot of the sources that I'm sure many of you know about for sensory processing disorder. I've got a list of the sources at the end. But what I've done for teachers is I've gone through, you know, the five senses that we all know about. So auditory is usually the first thing that gets hit by kids in classes. And so, of course, any of us who know anything about sensory processing disorder, we know how confusing it can be because you have children who are undersensitive, hyposensitive, and you have children who are oversensitive, hypersensitive, and of course, you have children who are both. And on any one day, they will be exhibiting both of these sensitivities in different ways. So a teacher with no background, with a classroom of 20 to 30 kids, where at this point the percentages are probably about 15, about half of those kids are going to have some kind of sensory processing issue.
Joanie, did you say 15 or 50?
The numbers now about sensory processing are 1 in 6 in America.
Okay,
that
1 in 6.
1 in 6 school-age children have some form of sensory processing that is impacting their comfort level in public places and in a classroom, okay?
Wow.
At that wonderful conference that you and I were at, Luminara, where they talked about irritated nervous system, you know, so I'm working with teachers about recognizing sensory processing disorder, which I fully believe is a result of irritated nervous systems. And that is very much how it has expressed for my son. But what I have here is, you know, a sheet for auditory, a sheet for tactile, a sheet for olfactory. Whoever thinks that kids are going to be impacted by smell? But you'll have children who are sitting in a classroom and they are nauseous because their sense of smell is so acute that they can smell the detergent, that they can smell somebody's deodorant, that they can certainly smell all kinds of things that, you know, quote unquote, me with my allergies is not the least bit aware of. But these are things that impact children's learning. Then you've got, obviously, the oral and the gustatory, the kids that chew on everything. You've got visual processing. And of course, this is huge in a classroom. When I was a full classroom teacher, I taught music. I right away noticed that if I handed children a sheet of lyrics, okay, there were the kids that could read this size print. There were the kids that would look at this and go like that and just throw it away because it was too much information on one piece of paper. So if you think about schools and worksheets, okay, if you hand a child that is overly visually stimulated too much information, they can't do anything with that worksheet and the impact and the ramifications of that. And then, of course, we get to the two sensory systems that very few people, unless they have studied about this, are aware of, which is the proprioceptive system and the vestibular system. And for each of these sheets, I have the pictures that kind of show a stereotypical overwhelm and underwhelm, then lists of traits of how this might appear in a classroom, and then at the bottom, simple strategies that the non-professional general ed teacher can try to help a child that they see doing this. And of course, for sensory processing disorder, the best thing is to be able to pull in an occupational therapist who really understands this. But as we all know, many school systems at this point don't have that kind of funding. What I would like to share with you now is a song called You Have No Idea.
Oh, great. I love this one.
And this is all about sensory processing and all about the things that our kids are trying to tell us through their behavior. Sometimes I just can't calm down. My skin is on fire, my brain's whirling round. Moving makes it better, but I know that bothers you. I need some help, I don't know what to do. I know it seems strange when I stare at the floor, but if I look in your eyes, I can't hear anymore. In order to listen, I've gotta look away. Not all the time, but it's really bad today. Well, you have no idea what it's like to be me. No idea how hard it can be. No idea how I long to be free. You have no idea what it's like to be me. I know you get embarrassed when we're out and about. The noise and crowds scare me, but I don't mean to shout. I know you spent a lot on my nice new shirt. I can't put it on, it makes my body hurt. Well, you have no idea what it's like to be me. No idea how hard it can be. No idea how I long to be free. You have no idea what it's like to be me. I know you worked real hard to make this good food. The smell hurts my head. I don't mean to be rude. I don't mean to misbehave. I don't mean to get mad. I'm so sorry. I don't want you to be sad. Well, teacher says I'm spoiled. Grandpa says I just need rules. Grandma says in her time I wouldn't dare do what I do. But they don't understand what it's like inside of me, 'cause bad behavior is all that they see. And they have no idea what it's like to be me. No idea how hard it can be. No idea how I long to be free. They have no idea what it's like to be me. And you have no idea what it's like to be me. No idea how hard it can be. No idea how I long to be free. You have no idea what it's like to be me.
Wow, that's so amazing, Joanie, and I'm sure parents can relate. And I'm thinking maybe that gives parents and teachers and whoever's listening ideas of like, oh, maybe that's what they mean to say, or oh, maybe that's what's going on. So thank you for sharing that.
I always tell teachers, this seems so simplistic, but what I want people to understand is that behavior is communication. And in principle, we all know that. But when we see quote unquote misbehavior or bad behavior or disruptive behavior, we, all of us automatically, immediately go to, this child doesn't know how to behave, or this child has not been parented well. And so parents of children with special needs are dealing with at least a double whammy, if not a triple, quadruple whammy, because they're trying to help their children and they're being criticized and judged. And, you know, what I am constantly talking to teachers about is parents often don't know. So it's not a matter of denial. It's not a matter of non-disclosure. Parents do not know. And why do parents often not know? This is the kicker. In 2012, the American Pediatric Association put out a announcement to all American pediatricians to not diagnose sensory processing disorder unless it was accompanied by a comorbid diagnosis of autism or ADD or ADHD, something that they could diagnose. But their point was that there hasn't been enough research, which isn't entirely true. There hasn't been enough research to determine what is causing sensory processing disorder, and so they should not be diagnosing it. Now, obviously, there are still many, many pediatricians who are helping parents who come with a child and say, yeah, I don't know what's going on. My kid refuses to put on socks. My kid refuses to keep on shoes. My kid refuses to eat certain foods. My kid refuses, you know, all these different things that lots of kids refuse to eat different foods. So that's not something that's so unusual. But when getting your child dressed in the morning is an all-out battle because they just can't put on certain clothes, and maybe you're the kind of parent that's concerned with how they look, and you really want them to put on those nice new crisp jeans, but they are screaming bloody murder because they don't want to put them on. Well, why don't they want to put them on? Because they have a tactile sensitivity, and those pants are so painful for them that they can't function.
Yeah.
And so this kid gets to school, and this is particularly true, I think, in preschool settings. This kid gets to school exhausted from this all-out battle that they've already had, and they're likely still wearing these pants that are so painful for them that they can't think. And then the teacher is dealing with this, okay? And the parent who dropped the kid off is exhausted and doesn't understand. So parents are you know, in many ways at this tremendous disadvantage now with this announcement having been put out 6 years ago by the Pediatric Association. Because, as I said, the research shows that 1 in 6 children are dealing with sensory processing disorder. And depending on who you're listening to regarding autism, you know, the CDC has finally updated to 1 in 57, while the NHIS in January updated to 1 in 37 children on the autism spectrum disorder. So there are still far more children having sensory processing issues that are impacting their ability to be in the world than have diagnosable autism spectrum disorders.
That's true. And some parents don't want to have a diagnosis, or they don't want to be categorized, their kids to be categorized. So, I mean, I can understand both the people who do want their kids to be categorized because they get services, and the kids and the parents who don't want their kids to be categorized because they don't want to have the stigma. So I think it's, you know, we can do all the statistics we want, but it's more than probably the statistics show, as you're saying. So what would you said you had strategies for maneuvering in the school years, and what are these? Please share them.
Well, so regarding the non-label, because of the stigma, I was a mom. I had been a teacher before I was a mom. I had taught kids already back in the 90s with autism. It was obviously far less common in those years. My son was born in 1995, and I suspected that something was up, but I did not want to use the word autism because I was afraid of what it would do to me. Because at that time, that word carried the same emotional impact as cancer, as tuberculosis carried back at the turn of the 19th century. You know, there are these different words that carry this heavy, heavy vibration.
A certain stigma to it.
Right. And so I didn't want to use that word. So I refused to use that word. And my son was 3 when we moved to the United States. He was born in Israel, and we lived in Israel until he was 3. We came here. He was still largely nonverbal. And a teacher friend here in the United States said to me, look, you can choose not to label him for yourself. And you can choose not to say something to teachers. But the teachers are just going to go into the teacher's room and they're going to label the kid. And out of ignorance, maybe they'll label him bad. Maybe they'll label him weird. Maybe they'll label him a problem. Obviously, this is a pejorative view of teachers. Many teachers are not like that. But that was a really interesting perspective for me, because at the time I was not teaching in an elementary school. I didn't understand the dynamics of American elementary schools. And what I would love to pass on to parents, and in saying this, I am speaking both as a parent and as a teacher, because I have spent many years playing both those roles. So I would love to be the kind of teacher that I want for my own son. And in order to do that with other people's children, I need a partnership. So what I am always telling parents, somebody also said this to me real early on. He's a wonderful professor of speech pathology. And he said to me, your kid's not easy in a classroom. And so you need to be really thankful for the people who are able to be with him and to include him. And that seems in some ways kind of harsh. I mean, I remember at the time thinking, well, that's their job, you know. But as I progressed as a teacher and more children with sensory issues were appearing in my classrooms. A very short anecdote. It was 1998 when we moved to the United States, and I was right away teaching preschool music and saw 500 kids a week. The only 3-year-old, the only preschooler I knew with autism was my own son. The next year, maybe there was one in one school. The next year, maybe there was one in every school. And very quickly, there was 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 in every classroom. Wow. So I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a scientist. I can't give you those statistics because I didn't do the research the right way at the time. Now I wish I had.
You're an observer.
I am an observer. I am an observer who understands from inside what's happening for children. And so the explosion is very clear to educators. And what really, really helps an educator is when a parent can be a partner. Can I share another song?
Yes, please do.
Okay. So this is actually the opening to this song comes from a wonderful director of a preschool. She was the director of the first preschool we put my son into when he was still nonverbal, when he was 3. Amazing woman. She's been an educator for 40 years now. And she said, in that time, she's seen parenting change a lot. And she says, this is what I want to tell parents. It's okay to say no. It's okay if they don't get their way. It's even okay if they cry, 'cause it's okay to have a bad day. And it's okay to say wait. It's okay if it's not right now. It's okay if their friend can't play. It's okay if they fall down. One book says do this, another one says no that. The contradictions are so confused, it makes me want to take a nap. Funny how the research tells us what we already know. All the podcasts and the theories, the list of do's and don'ts. Well, too much hurt isn't good, but none at all cause problems too. We've got both sun and rain. That's how the rainbows peek through. Life is not like the movies. Every day's not nice and neat. No fairy tale endings. We learn from bitter and sweet. One book says do this, another one says no that. The contradictions are so confused, it makes me want to take a nap. Funny how the research tells us what we already know. All the podcasts and the theories and the lists, do's and don'ts. But it's okay to say no. It's okay if they don't get their way. It's even okay if they cry. It's okay to have a bad day.
Thank you for that. I remember, I'm just going to share a little story. When my son was really young, I was doing this thing called reevaluation counseling or co-counseling, which is where you pair up with another person and you basically listen to each other and have your feelings and let out your frustrations. And so I would do that with my son. I'd be like, it's okay to have feelings. You can have your feelings. If he didn't get his way, for example. So I agree. It's okay to have your way. And then I got to a certain point where it seemed like a lot. And and then I realized that when he would have a tantrum and bite me or something, later on I would say, well, you bit me. He said, no, I didn't. And I realized he kind of went out of his mind. And didn't even know what he was doing. And then I thought, this is something different than just having feelings. So there's also that distinction, like, yes, it's good because crying helps us relieve stress, and it's really, really good. And then if it's way beyond and your kid's not remembering, then there's something to check out there. So just to say that there's both.
Yes. And whenever I sing this song for teachers go, oh, this is what I want parents to know. Because, and again, I do feel, I have two children. One is neurotypical, one is not neurotypical. And parenting these two children required two different skill sets. And so when my son was actually going to the same high school that my daughter had gone to, I said to the staff, don't think you know us. You know us as her family. We're a different family, and we are required to parent in a different way for him. And in many ways, it's harder for me to parent him because he really, really does well with firmer guidelines. And I'm not a firm guideline kind of person. I'm this hippy-dippy, everybody should do what they want. And that was not helpful for him. And I, as a teacher, I need to conduct class in a way that as many people as possible are moving in the same direction. And if you have a child who's only used to doing what they want, always used to getting what they want, and not familiar with the word no, that child has a very, very hard time being part of a larger community. And so, you know, the next song that I will share about maneuvering the school years seems to say the total contradictory of what I'm saying here. But I honestly believe that we are social creatures to a certain degree. And, you know, I know my son wants to be part of community. He's not one of these kids that wants to stay away from crowds, that wants to stay away from communities. He wants to be part of community, and he wants to be accepted. And to do that, yeah, absolutely. You know, but I think a lot of times the stereotype of autism, and maybe even more so the stereotype of Asperger's syndrome, is that you know, people don't care. They don't care about being part of community. I don't think that's true from my work with young adults with Asperger's. I don't think that's true at all.
I would agree with you. I think they don't know how to say it, but that they do want to be included and accepted and a part of things.
Right, in whatever way. In other words, you know, maybe it's not, maybe they don't, they're not looking to go along with the crowd and everything, and that's great. But there is this stereotype out there, which I think is very untrue. And I think as parents of children with special needs, we are choosing, for lack of a better phrase, we are choosing our battles. You know, so I would recommend, don't worry about the clothing. Let the kid choose what's comfortable for them to wear. That's not a battle. That's really, really important. But do work on having your child understand no, having your child understand wait, having your child understand that you don't always get your way. I think that builds resilience, and I think that builds ability to be with other people in a more fluid way. Mm-hmm. So that said, I want to play this contradictory song.
Yes, please.
Which is all about school. And this is actually, I didn't find it, but I have somewhere here. There's a wonderful book, a wonderful picture book called The Animal School. It was written by George Revis, who was the assistant superintendent of Cincinnati, Ohio schools in the 1940s. Okay. And when I first found this, I was like, 1940s, we're talking 70, almost 80 years ago, all right? And our schools are still not reflecting this. This is called Everyone's Good at Something. Well, back in the day when the critters went to school, they learned to run and climb and fly and swim in the pool. Now everyone was good at one or two things, but there was no one that was good at everything. Duck was good at swimming and could usually fly, but she just couldn't run, though she really tried. Instead of letting her swim and do what she did best, they made her work on running and she failed every test. Well, Eagle was best at flying up high, but he just couldn't climb, though he really tried. He got punished when he flew to the treetop. They called him a cheater and they made him stop. Rabbit was great at running fast, she won every race, but she was forced to go swimming and she couldn't even place. In fact, it got so bad she kind of broke down. After that, she couldn't even hop across the town. Well, Squirrel could climb and run real well, but flying was harder, he just couldn't excel. If he started in the treetop, he could kind of fly down, but they made him try starting from the ground. Prairie Dog's parents complained to the school, lessons didn't include digging or tunnel tools. They went and found a teacher on their own. Badger was glad to teach feels bad because they've spent all their time trying to do what they can't. It's true, it's good to learn new things, but we gotta realize no one's good at everything. We gotta remember no one's good at everything, and it's just fine that no one's good at everything.
Love that. I think it takes a talented teacher to recognize that too.
Right. And so it also takes help from a parent to communicate. And again, you know, I had a background in education before I became a parent. Obviously, not everybody does. Mm-hmm. But I think there's that good old phrase, a mother's intuition, a father's intuition. I think if we take the time to observe our kids and understand that behavior is communication, we can certainly see what our children gravitate to. You know, what are the things that give them pleasure? What is it they want to do? What are they avoiding? And avoiding is often, for instance, my son was avoiding reading. We're a household that has more books than anything. And he, grew up being read to. He was avoiding reading. And because I'm a music teacher who's been teaching children to read notes, I knew that many children cannot track. Their eyes don't move until they're about 8 years old. So the whole premise of teaching children to read in preschool is a little early, okay? Most children's eyes will not do the tracking that's necessary. So if a parent understands that, they're not going to be pushing. Yes, they should be working on letter recognition. There's all kinds of other pre-reading things they can be doing. But if a child's avoiding reading, they don't want to do that homework. There's a reason. There's something happening. So a parent can be observant in a way that a teacher can't be. And a parent communicating those things to a teacher are really, really helpful.
I have a couple questions. So that other people might be thinking, but it's just jumping out at me. So what you say to, have this cooperative relationship with the teacher. What if the teacher isn't all that cooperative? I've heard that a lot. Well, the teacher doesn't tell me anything, or the teacher doesn't seem to care.
So I'm all about empathy. Teachers at this point are under the most horrific conditions. They are being pressured from testing that, kids have to be doing certain things at certain times. They have to be accomplishing these benchmarks. They have to be teachers are under pressure from administration to have classroom behavior management skills. Teachers are having professional development days cut. Teachers are having bigger and bigger classrooms, and teachers are having more and more children with autism spectrum disorder and sensory processing disorder. And teachers are not getting that kind of training in their education programs. So even if they've done student teaching and they think they know what they're walking into, it's hard. And depending on the person's character, okay, you will have people who are open and can admit that they're having a hard time. Most of the time, especially with young teachers, which is what we are running into more often because many veteran teachers are leaving, young teachers are trying to prove themselves. And young teachers are trying to show that they've got it all under control. And young teachers are overloaded and overwhelmed. So whenever at all possible, I, would forever be reminding myself as I was walking into these IEP meetings and, parent-teacher meetings with teachers who were telling me all kinds of negative things about my son and seemed very flippant and uncaring. Whenever humanly possible, I was trying to be empathetic and supportive. And 9 times out of 10, when I could do that, I could turn things around and get my child more care.
Okay, so give an example of what that giving a teacher empathy would look like. So just maybe one situation.
So I'm trying to remember how old my son was. So he went to so many different schools, my poor son. I think he was about 10. And I think it was the beginning of the puberty hormones. And he just tumbled off the ability to function at school. And he was just out of control. And he had a first-year teacher who loved him. She truly loved him. She did care about him. But by this point, you know, she was ripping her hair out, and she had lost her love for him. But so I came in, and, you know, the first thing I said to her was, you know, oh my goodness, you have such a load on your plate. I am in such respect of what you are trying to do. You are doing a phenomenal job given the conditions that you are working under. And then you've got my kid on top of it, you know, and I so appreciate what you are doing for him. And I know how hard this is. And now he's flipping out even more than he was 2 months ago. And that got her crying, which isn't necessarily what's going to happen in most cases.
We're not trying for that.
I'm probably the same age as her mother, you know, so it was like, but that really turned it around, you know. So instead of coming in as an adversary, now that doesn't always work. And so that's step one, you know. But as far as I'm concerned, if step one doesn't work, you don't forfeit your kid to a bad teacher. And so then you go meet with the principal and you ask for a meeting with whatever kind of support staff is in the school. And obviously all of that is very tricky now because lots of schools don't have support staff anymore.
But don't a lot of kids have aides, one-to-one aides, and then they might be in on that meeting. And so again, appreciating them, giving them support and empathy, and saying, oh, I know how hard it must be for you to work with him. Because I am with him all, you know, I'm with him when you're not. Right. You know, to really let them know that they're appreciated.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And we never actually had any aides, but thank you for bringing that up, because many aides have very little training for what they are being expected to do. So again, as much as possible, to have that aide be your partner. There is a reason that you're not there and the aide is there. And so whenever you can support that person, whenever you can give that person that, that sense of, you know, I'm here for you to ask questions, please ask me questions. Whenever you can say to the person, hey, he's had a really bad morning, you know, maybe this wouldn't be the morning to go real hard and heavy on absolute compliance with everything. You know, give them information, appeal to their humanity. You know, look at them like a partner, treat them like a partner.
Well, especially if you're telling them something that's going to make their school day easier with your kid, who wouldn't take that, you know? That's like a nice ace in the pocket.
Right. You know, I always find like, so much is about ego, and that's so unhelpful. And so whenever I could be, you know, I'm here for my kid in this context, and I'm here to try and help my kids succeed. And so I need these other people around me. And sometimes they're really not nice to me. And that sucks, but that's part of the picture, and in whatever way I can work with them. But I am also not willing to be taken advantage of. And if somebody is not doing their job, I'm going to kick it upstairs in whatever nice way I can, but I need my kid to get the services that he's supposed to get.
Yeah, good. Thank you for that. My other question is, you said watch what your kid does. Like, your son didn't read. He wasn't interested in reading. So there's something there to look at. So I know a lot of parents who their kids just want to be on the iPads or they just want to be on the video games. And so if you say, just let your kid do what he wants to do and just watch the videos or be on the iPads, I'm not sure.
No, that's not what I said. That's not what I said.
Well, you can let them do what they want to do or what. So I just want to clarify that.
Right. No, I said observe what they are attracted to.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So even in the world of video games, which I am not, I'm not a big proponent of video games, and I know it's a big issue with autism spectrum kids. And why? Okay. There's a great book, which I like to couple with that song, It's Okay to Say No. There's a great book written by a psychologist named Deborah Moore in conjunction with Temple Grandin. And Temple Grandin is a name that many people know as an adult with autism, and she was probably one of the few people in her generation with autism, and so she went through a lot. The book is called The Loving Push. And they have a whole heavy thing about video games and that you have to limit the time and all of that. I never found that was a huge issue because we would find times to go outside. And obviously, I mean, we live in a city, but it's Columbus, Ohio is kind of a weird city with a lot of forest and a lot of parks. And my kid felt better outside. So, I would make it a priority after work to get him out, and we would be outside and, and then running around and getting all those yayas out. This book, The Loving Push, does have a lot of really good suggestions if you feel your kid is addicted to video games, because I think there is something very comforting. One of the first songs, which we won't have time for me to sing, but one of the first songs that I wrote about my son was called My Elephant Boy, because he was obsessed with elephants and, always had some kind of elephant with him. And that was his comfort, because everything else was hard. Being with people was hard. Maneuvering his way around the world was hard. It was scary. So video games are providing a comfort. And that's not all bad. But the question is, how do you maneuver around that so that's not the only thing?
So it sounds like the going outside is, and you can even do it maybe barefoot or, grounding and being in nature. Sounds like it's a really good option versus getting all these Wi-Fi EMFs and being inside. Right. And also if kids want to just be on the iPad, I know it's a great babysitter too, like it gives parents it gives parents some peace and quiet when their kid, and learning apps and so they're learning, but there's still that iPad kind of addiction. And when I've talked to clients who, as their kids detox more and get the nutrients they need in their bodies, they don't want to be around that stuff as much. They want to be connected to people. So I think there is a comfort in it, but once they feel better in their bodies, move away from that naturally. Right. But I think you have a great suggestion, is just to be outside more and actually in connection, however they want to be in connection maybe.
Right. And that's the other thing, that in terms of observing, so if your kid is real into video games, are there things you could play with them? So, and obviously that also is a process. There are many kids that, no, leave me alone. This is my time, but to somehow get in there. There's another name I want to throw out there. His name is Dr. James McDonald. I had mentioned him earlier. He was a professor of speech pathology at Ohio State University. He was the director of the department for years and years. And he has a wonderful website which is all about play theory. And he's got very clear strategic, do this, do this, do this, to get into your kid's space to have some interaction, you know, so that you're also building while they're detoxing, while you're doing all this stuff, you're building these connections between you and them. So when I was talking about observe what your kid likes, also observe what games they're attracted to. You know, you learn something about somebody's inside by what is pulling them. And, you know, and so when you go outside, what is it your kid wants to do? What is it they don't want to do? Just be looking at these things, which demands of us that we're not talking to our friends, that we're, you know, and we have to balance everything. We're human. We need our adult time. We need our friend time. We need our downtime. You need to use the iPad as a babysitter. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're running close to out of time, but I wanted to get to transitioning to adulthood. Any tips you have around that?
So I want to share with you one song. It's a quick one, and this is called Social Cues Blues. And I think this is where our kids transitioning to adulthood need very, very direct help from parents in terms of what are people expecting of you now that you have this adult body, and the guidance that they need from us. So please just tell me simply, could you be direct and kind? Too many words are hard for me. It's like tripping someone blind. Somehow everyone knows what topics are taboo. I don't. I've got the social cues blues. Idioms, analogies, fancy metaphors, all this language I don't get, but I know I can't ignore. I'm supposed to try and walk in someone else's shoes. What's that even mean? I've got the social cues blues. Well, hearing tone of voice, seeing all your faces, I get so anxious trying to follow social graces. Reading body language makes me so confused. Can't you just tell me I've got the social cues blues? I'm supposed to understand who is friendly, who is not. I'm supposed to just be quiet, blend in, don't stick out. They tell me I'm too loud, it's not okay to blow a fuse. It's hard, I've got the social cues. They tell me I should always ask someone what they like. I gotta learn to converse, not talk about myself all night. I work so hard to figure out all of these cultural clues. I'm trying, but I've got the social cues blues. So our kids who are adults, I'm seeing from Missy Pear, how do I see this whole thing, Luminara?
Okay, I'll tell you. I'll read it. My son is 16, turning 17 in August. It was a light switch when he turned 14. He's doing better with ABA therapy, but I noticed he is more anxious now. He is nonverbal. It makes it real hard to completely understand his feelings. That's from Missy.
Yes. I mean, that is a place where, you know, I know that I'm in a very privileged position because my kid can communicate. Many of these songs, the song you have no idea what it's like to be me, those are his words. You know, I always tell everybody he didn't speak them in rhyme. I did put them into the song, but those are specific messages he has communicated to us. Social cues blues. These are the things that he says to us now that he's 23, and he has horrible, horrible misunderstandings happen to him on a regular basis. He feels terrible about it. So what I would say, Missy, is I wonder if there's a way to work with pictures. I truly believe that even when kids are nonverbal, I mean, we know this. It's not that they don't have thoughts. It's not that they don't have language. They just don't have a way of communicating it through words. But I wonder, you know, could you show him pictures? Could you, can he respond to what you're play acting? I think the world is really, really scary. And when you are smart enough to know that you're different and that people are uncomfortable with you and you don't know how to help them be comfortable, it's incredibly threatening to you. You know, and part of my mission is to come to communities, to come to churches, to come to schools, to talk to the parents in the communities that are not dealing specifically with autism the way we are, or with disability the way we are. Talk to the ones that don't understand it and beg them to learn some compassion. Beg them to understand what's happening for our children, what's happening for us as the family members of those children. I have lots of songs about unsolicited parenting advice. Okay, I think we've all.
I love that song.
You know, so people, it doesn't matter whether you have a child with a disability or not. Any parent receives unsolicited parenting advice, but there's that double twist of the sword when you're doing your darndest to get your kid through the day, and somebody's judging your parenting. So
yeah.
So I don't know if that helps, Missy. But I'm also happy. Luminar. I don't know if you've shared my website with people. I mean, people can contact me and we can continue the conversation.
Yeah, your website is in the email. We'll send out an email with the recording, and we'll have your website in it again. And there is someone, Angshujit from India, who's raising her hand. So I'm going to unmute you, and you can ask your question. Angshujit, I'm not sure if that's your if I'm saying it right. So go ahead. Oops, unmute. I'm trying to unmute you. I don't know why it's not working. Unmute.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you might be able to unmute yourself by going in the lower left-hand corner of the video screen, and there's a microphone probably with a line through it. So if you want to speak, you can do that, because I'm not able to unmute you for some reason. It's not working. So
here's my 5-year-old son is high functioning.
Can you unmute yourself, Angshujit?
I wonder, sometimes that I can't.
Oh.
Sometimes that bar on the bottom disappears if you kind of roll your arrow along the bottom of the screen. Sometimes it reappears, but if not,
and you know what else, Joanie? Sometimes people don't have microphones, so
right.
That could be
absolutely. Type in your question.
Yes, you can type your question. And in the meanwhile, if anyone else has a question that you'd like to pose to Joanie, you can type that in, or I guess raise your hand or unmute yourself to ask. And Joanie, I'm not, 2 people have raised their hands. Okay. So the other one is Raquel. Okay, let's see. Angshujit, while you're typing in your question, I'm going to go ahead and see if I can Oh, Raquel, you're unmuted. Go ahead and ask your question,
Yeah,
Raquel.
thank you. I was waiting for you to say. Thank you, everyone, and hi. Thank you for taking my question. I've been enjoying the songs, and I've been in and out of the web. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. Anyway,
It's okay.
so my son's 6 years old. He was diagnosed at 4 with autism. He's high functioning, but my concern right now is I am seeing progress with him. I'm seeing him acting like a normal, I mean, I want to say neurotypical 3 to 4 year old, where he is in the stage of the potty mouth stage. So I'm finding it very difficult to deal with that right now. Um, Anything he hears, just blurting it out repeatedly. I'm not sure how I can get any help with that.
So that's, that's the whole song that I sang about, the social cues blues, because it's every age. At every age we have what's considered appropriate development, and our kids typically are not in that same place as their biological age. So I mean, for me, it's always been about a lot of direct instruction of this isn't what you should be saying in public. But I do find, and obviously this is a question of your own comfort level, I do find that it has been very helpful for us to let my son know that if you need to talk that way, the way to do it is at home, because there's a level of compulsion and almost obsessiveness that happens with these different speech patterns. So you can't take it away totally, because it's just going to then be seeping out everywhere. But if it's very clear that, there's the way you can talk in public, at school, at church, at whatever, whatever places you're going, and the way you can talk at home, and that this particular thing is something that you need to keep at home. And so you make it very clear. That's not going to be, ignore that. That's somebody calling me.
That's a great idea. At home behavior and out behavior. Yeah.
Right. And that is something as a teacher that I would always say to kids in my class. Because as a teacher, I can't tell them whether their parents allow a particular kind of language. But I can certainly say, you know what, that's not okay at school. So just make sure you're keeping that at home. And that's something that you can work with your child's teacher to let he or she know that this is what you're working on, and they could reinforce that gently, kindly. If there's a lot of emotion attached to it, it becomes more scary, I think, for the kid.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to add something to that, Raquel, and that is that as your son, you said you're working on things and he's getting better. As I don't know what you're doing, detox supplements, I don't know what, but as you continue doing that, he'll probably have the likelihood to catch up with his, he'll get from 2 or 3 years behind developmentally to less and less so until he catches up with his peers.
Yes, thank you. That is exactly what I've been finding. Definitely supplements and the therapy and chiropractic care, everything that I can think of to help detox him and get him to a better place. And he's actually, thank you for pointing that out, he's excellent at school. No problems whatsoever, very disciplined. At home, I can understand how he is so much more in a relaxed situation, but he takes it too far. So yeah, the public thing, I definitely have to work on that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And I always want to say to parents, it's better. I mean, you're in good shape if they are able to behave at school and then let their hair down at home than the reverse. So.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, let's go back to Anshuji's question. Is there a chance that her son, who is 5 and high functioning can come out of the spectrum?
You know, I think you're the one that works on the biomedical stuff. So I'll just, you know, I have spent 23 years working on different biomedical things. My kid is still very much on the spectrum. That said, he's an amazing human being. It's not a death sentence. He is able to function. He's in college. Those are things that I never, ever thought could be the case. I do know people whose kids have come out of the spectrum.
Right, fully recovered. So it's possible, you know, you need to work at it though, because what's happening in your child's body, and any child with either sensory processing or autism spectrum, anything, is that there's stuff that's not functioning well, right? Like the neurological system, there's probably toxins in there. So, you know, when you attend to those things, and what I find mostly is we got to let go of things. The body has to let go of things. And when it lets go of things, it functions better. And of course, then you provide it with good raw materials, like the vitamins, minerals, amino acids, you know, good food. Then I think anything's possible.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, next
know,
question.
And also, I mean, I think that we, you know, even the people that there are many people who don't even try to detox their kids because they just kind of accept, oh, this is the way it is. To me, detoxing, whether the end result is totally being free of being on the spectrum, or the end result is just being more and more and more of who you are, then that's always something to be working on, you know. So to me, the detoxing and the supplements and the helping. So ignore that call. I'm going to text the person who's trying to get in touch with me.
Well, and while you do that, I just wanted to add that, you know, what I find with kids on the spectrum, or almost anyone these days, but kids who have, you know, these hard situations in the body, they have a hard time letting go of the toxins, but we're all actually exposed to toxins every day in the air. There's a lot of toxins in water. It depends, you know, if you're eating not whole food and organic, you're exposed to toxins. So we're really all exposed all the time. So to be doing some gentle detox, or being aware of what you can do, maybe you don't do it every day, but you do it, you know, every other week or something. As you know, as the parent, still do it on yourself. I think that's only going to help us all, you know, because we live in a pretty toxic environment. I don't want to get doom and gloom, but I can go there easily. What I'd like to do is go on to Missy's question. You're welcome, Angshujit. I'd like to go on to Missy's question. Can you give more information on detox supplements? I apologize if you already touched on that. I just joined, so we haven't talked about that. There's a lot of, I'll just say that since you're still texting, and then you can give your perspective. There's a lot of detox supplements, and it kind of depends on where your child is. So I would say you want to have an assessment by a practitioner, or maybe you already have, you know, maybe you've had a hair mineral test, or, you know, stool or urine test. You know, I think the thing is to find out where your child is. What I find typically is that you can give a lot of detox supplements, but if the systems of elimination aren't open, like if the lymph isn't flowing, if the liver's not open, if the kidneys are backed up, you know, if your child's not releasing through the respiratory tract, we also release toxins there and through the skin. So if those systems aren't open, anything you put in like there's already a backlog, so it's things get a little bit clogged. So I think the key before you even give detox supplements is to make sure the systems of elimination are open and moving, and then again you want to have an assessment on that, right? Because you don't know. But you know, I can tell you, kids on the spectrum that I look at, when I assess them in that regard, they're usually at 50, 60, 70% efficient as far as moving things through. So I think if you're going to give a detox thing that's, let's say you're going to give a zeolite that crosses the blood-brain barrier that will pull the metals out, you want to make sure they're going to get out of the body and not rearrange themselves somewhere else and create havoc. So I think it's a more complicated answer and more complicated question. It's just a complicated situation. What's your thoughts, Joanie?
So our experience with detox was that exactly as Luminara is saying, and we did always work with professionals, but my son, I used to say it was like his system had created balance in the imbalance. And so he was resisting any external attempt to rebalance. And he would have terrible, terrible, terrible reactions to even homeopathic detoxes, you know, things that are supposed to be super gentle. So what I learned was that you move super, super slowly. I call my program, but first do no harm. And, you know, that was very much came out of my experience parenting, and therefore applied to my teaching, that, you know, I, as the parent, want to get my kid well as quick as possible. And I'm going to try all these things that I trust with all these people that I trust. But I got to work with his system, and I got to do it in a way that's as least harmful as possible.
Yep, that seems to be the case. Thank you, Joanie. That's really enlightening to hear that your son created balance within the imbalance, because I think that does happen because they know their way of surviving, and they're like, okay, this is what it is, and you try and move them, and it can create issues. So Missy also said she's scheduled to do the testing, and she started on Omega and CoQ10 patches. So it sounds like you're working with a great professional, and Omegas are always good. And I think they help clean the cell membranes, and they'll help with cell communication. And it's very nutritious. And then the CoQ10 patches will help with energy. He doesn't swallow or take liquid medication. That's a tough one. So that's a really tough one. Yeah. There's also syringes. I know a lot of parents don't like to put stuff with syringes, and they don't like to be that invasive with kids, but I've heard that is another way to get things in. So I really want to wrap up. And Joanie, you said you have a program, so I'd love for you to tell us about your program and what you do, and what, you know, you already said you're willing to keep communicating with people. So just let us know what you're offering for parents who are listening.
So I started doing, when I started presenting, I've been a performer for my whole adult life, but when I started presenting particularly about disabilities and inclusion, I was initially just doing support evenings for parents. I call them concert conversations. I sing a little and we talk a little. I think that as parents, we often don't have who to talk to, and we don't have who to share the specific challenges that we are facing. And so I think we need to share. We need to be able to be supported. I also know that as parents, probably the last thing we will choose to do with our time is to go out and do something to support ourselves, because we are spending an awful lot of time supporting our kids. But it's super important. So that's one thing I do, is that I come and I do just support evenings for groups of parents. And I cannot toot my own horn, but people have said they really appreciate them. So
well, that's why you're here, because I recognize and I appreciate you, and I see you have a lot to offer. And I wanted to say the parents at the retreat we were at, the conference, were also super engaged and happy with your presence and your songs and what you had to say. So I'm tooting a horn for you too.
Thank you, Lumina. I do teacher workshops, and this, again, I am specifically trying to do teacher workshops with general ed teachers. So if you are part of a PTA, PTO, and that's something that you could bring in a professional development workshop on sensory processing disorder in the general ed classroom. And it's totally geared towards teaching teachers to recognize, A, that behavior is communication, And B, what are the possible sources of that behavior? I also am doing workshops and concerts, as I said, for community groups. I don't know, you know, my kid would be one of those kids. We're Jewish. We would go to synagogue and he would flip out. We would walk outside, he'd be fine. We'd walk back inside, he'd flip out. I'm like, what is going on? So obviously a lot of those very big buildings have acoustics that are crazy making for our kids. Well, so you can't rebuild the building, but you certainly can get the community members to understand the challenge that your child and probably many other children, given the percentages, is dealing with in being in that setting, and you can develop more compassion. So I am doing workshops for community groups, churches, synagogues about building inclusion and compassion. And then working with, you know, again, in the educational world, working with administrators to understand what it is that the populations of children that are coming into their schools are dealing with.
So if people wanted to contact you, they can do so through your website, joaniecalem.com, right?
Yes. Yes.
And that'll be in the email too. And so they could invite you to come in and speak in their community in some way. Okay.
Right.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your songs and your wisdom and your experience. And I love that you were an educator, a teacher, and a parent who can see both sides of the same coin. And thanks for answering those questions. I just really appreciate your being here, Joanie.
Thank you for inviting me, Luminara. I love everything you're doing. It's amazing.
Thank you.